Today's episode is brought to you by Roosters, a noble grill in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They provide an upscale menu of Southern food and dishes with international influences made from local ingredients. More info on them at the end of the episode.
Welcome to the Semmax Way, the definitive podcast for mastering finance, investment, and retirement planning. Prepare to unlock the secrets to financial success as we delve into lucrative investment strategies and provide expert guidance towards a secure retirement. With over 20 years of experience, Semmax Financial Group has been dedicated to serving investors, and through this podcast, we aim to empower you with the knowledge to maximize your savings and achieve lasting financial freedom the Semmax way. Whether you're a professional finance enthusiast, a high net worth individual, or part of a sophisticated investment group, this podcast is tailor-made for you. And now, here is your host, Matt Landon, financial advisor for Semmax Financial Group and licensed CFP.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Semmax Way. My name's Matt Landon. I'm joined by Mr. Jordan Shinsky.
How's it going?
It's going good. Now, this is part two. We went over part one. So part one was having a first appointment with a financial advisor, and we discussed what you need to be aware of, what you might be expected to bring in, kind of how that conversation should go, some of the questions you should be asking.
Yep.
And this is part two. This is saying, okay, you've sat down with the advisor, you've asked a bunch of questions, they've asked you a bunch of questions, you shared a bunch of information. Now you're coming back in to sit down. What would you expect that second appointment to go like? How do you think it's gonna look?
Right
off the bat, what are some things you think people should be aware of when they're coming in for a second appointment?
Well, and I want to preface by saying this. First and foremost is that a lot of people get the idea of going in and sitting down with an advisor for the first time, that they're going to get a final determination of what type of plan they should put in place or something like that by the end of the first visit. We don't work like that. Some places will. Some places will sit you down. They'll do stuff in real time and kind of give you an answer at the end of that first visit, right? We don't work that way. We're going to go back. We're going to take your statements. We're going to take the information that we've acquired from the conversation we had. We're going to put our work in. This is where we do the analysis. This is where, we take the time to build a custom plan for every situation. And then we come back and we present it in a second visit.
And I think the key thing there is like when you're in a first appointment, the point, and I think we explained this pretty well in part one, but it's like the point of that first appointment is really to get to understand you and get to understand your situation. It is not necessarily to just give you flippant advice.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like when the only thing you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so when someone comes in and by the end of that first appointment, they're trying to sell you some product that has a commission, it's like, I think regardless of what I told you, you would have tried to sell me that. And so that's not the way we operate by any means.
Or they have a handful of default approaches that they will take. Right. And you can fit into a mold here or there. So I just wanted to be clear in mentioning that really we take more time in working with our prospects to identify what is the right course of action. We put in a lot of back end work to make sure that plan is customized and is appropriate and most suitable for their needs.
Well, and I think it's important to point out here, though, from a fiduciary standpoint, there are times where I sit down with people and I go, listen, I did a comprehensive analysis and I wouldn't change anything.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally, you're in a great position, or it's going to cost you from a tax standpoint to change it, or it's like for whatever reason, I look at it and I go, you're actually set up really well. I wouldn't change anything. In fact, I would say the second appointment is going to fall into one of three categories. The first category is the one that I hear the least, or I experience the least, and I wish I saw more of it, to be perfectly frank. And that is the folks that are in a great position. Mm-hmm. I look at them and I go, listen, you don't need to change anything. You're in a really good spot. You're not overpaying in taxes. You're not taking an inappropriate amount of risk. You're balanced incredibly well. If I wouldn't do anything differently. Yeah. I love seeing that.
I would say less than 10%.
Unfortunately, you're right. Yeah. Now, the second category, and I would say this is probably the biggest category, are folks that when we sit down, I look at it and I go, you know what? There are some ways to improve this. There are some ways to be more tax advantaged. There's some ways to reduce your risk. There's some different things we can alter here to really put you in the best position possible. Or you're getting a plan put together for the first time and you're saying, hey, I know you'd never even thought about how to take your Social Security in connection with everything else. Here's how to put it all together. It's like that's the majority. And in most cases, it's not a life or death. You absolutely have to do this. It's more of a, this is the way to be the most optimized. Yeah. This is the way to make those little changes that have huge impacts down the road.
I think the most, frequent financial second visit that I run into is kind of that scenario where, okay, the plan, what I have in place has been working for me, but now I'm going through a transitional point. Now I need, whether it be a new plan, and I don't know what that plan looks like myself, so I need a professional to help me, or I need a bigger picture finally. Right.
It's like I've been looking at the stock positions, but I haven't been considering the tax implications. Yeah. I've been thinking about stocks, and I've even been considering taxes, but I don't know how to tie this in with total income, or I don't know how to pull this together with the loss of a spouse, or I don't know how to be the most advantaged from fees, or, it's like when it comes to estate planning, that side of things. It's that robust, holistic approach.
Yeah. Where you get into, hey, can we do gifting strategies? What about the concept of wealth transfer, right? How do I leave responsibly what I have left to my heirs, to charities, to my wife or my husband? So that's where that bigger picture really comes into play in this visit.
Right. And that's where I think part of the point of this visit is for the advisor to be sharing things that you didn't think to ask.
Yeah.
So it's like the advisor might have asked you in the first appointment, well, is charity important to you? And okay, do you go to church anywhere, and how do you do it? And the reason is not to be nosy. It's not to poke at you. But then in that second appointment, that should be circling back around. There needs to be a conversation around, well, actually, here's how you're doing it now. Here's ways that you can maximize that giving. If I can get you to give an extra over the course of your lifetime, $100,000 to a charity you care about and save you $100,000 in taxes, and all we're doing is slightly changing how you're giving now.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be excited about that?
And it's talking about implementing more specific strategies, right?
Absolutely.
Do we take advantage of QCDs, qualified charitable distributions? Do we use a donor advised fund? These are all things that we can employ. But having that initial conversation in the first visit about are you inclined to charitable giving tells me now, okay, what options are on the table for this particular strategy? Right. And that's some of the things we talk about in the second visit.
And then there's a third category as well. So the first category of people where I look at, I'm like, you don't need to change anything. Mm-hmm. Second category, I go, yes, you can change some things. Here's some ways to improve it, but it's not like you're in some horrible position.
Right.
And then the third category
is that horrible position.
It's people where you look at it and you go, listen, whether you work with me, whether you work with somebody else, you need to change this now.
Yeah.
It's like you have problems.
Yeah.
And I would say the two ends of the spectrum, it's somewhere around 10% on each side. And then the majority is in the middle.
I would say so. Yeah.
So when you're sitting in for that second appointment, I think it's really important, one, to be working with an advisor who, when they're pointing things out, it should never come across and it should never be, oh, how dare you do this? You're so dumb for putting it in this. That's not the case. It's like your advisor's job is to put you in the best position possible. Yep. So sometimes when things are being brought up, it's very sensitive when you share your information. And then when they come back and go, hey, there's a better way to do it, I think it's important to be cognizant of the fact that that's a very delicate situation. And it's important to understand you didn't do this for no good reason, and you're doing your best, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I know for me, I'm a runner and I love to run. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know for a fact, if I sat down with a professional running coach, they would look at me and be like, you are doing so many things wrong. And they would give me a plan, and I would look at them and I would go, yeah. And if I wasn't working, and if I had total discipline and never ate out, and if I, and if I had a wife that just let me live full time as a runner, you're right. That plan would be perfect. But I'm not trying to go to the Olympics here. I'm just trying to be a little bit of a better runner.
Right.
And I think that's where it's like, it's important to understand where are we at and what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. Someone who has put the time in to, save a portfolio for the last 20 years that's getting ready to retire. the last thing they want to feel like is that they're getting scolded, like they did it wrong. And that's not what this is about. It's not about identifying. It's not about slapping someone on the wrist or saying, "Oh, hey, this is." It could have been better, or it could have been this or that, or I wish I did this or that.
Yeah,
hindsight's always 20/20. It's about looking to the future and providing what we believe to be the most suitable, best investment strategy for that client moving forward. It's not about looking back and saying it was wrong, but just how can we put a plan in place that is most appropriate for your future?
And so that's where when you're sitting there talking to somebody, I think it's important to understand and have them look at it and say, hey, here's what's going well. Here's what isn't going well. And realize that just because there's another way to do it doesn't mean there's only one way to do it. Right.
Right.
And so I really don't like it when you sit down in a second appointment, if someone is trying to hard sell you on something. That drives me nuts personally.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's important to make sure that if there's adjustments, it's for your benefit. It's like, and anybody that sits there and says, you have to sign on the dotted line right now or this offer's gone, I don't care for that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not what our visits are about. And I tell clients this, our second financial visit is going to be one of the most comprehensive financial visits you will have. There's no question about it. We go into detail, don't we?
Because here's what we do. We're going to run through all of your accounts, what you share with us, right? Mm-hmm. And I like to start off by explaining the different money types that you have in your different accounts, because sometimes people don't realize this is pre-tax, this is post-tax, this is the most tax-favored way to be. So it's like we'll run through that with people. We're also going to go through a total risk analysis, and we're going to show you account by account how much risk are you taking inside of each one of your accounts. And then the thing is, we'll also show you the overall picture. So you can see total risk you're taking, and then you can see it broken down by account. And then the next one we're going to get into is...
Well, that goes into, we do a fee analysis.
Right.
Looking at anything from what are you paying in advisory fees? What are you paying in expense ratios within some of the funds that you may be invested in? This goes into, depending on the type of program that you're in, you may be paying commissions if you're still like working with a stockbroker, buying stuff on trade commissions, one-time upfront fees, sort of things. And we identify that. We break that all down for them.
And here's the thing about fees that I think sometimes does get missed is like, if you're paying fees and you're getting value for what you're paying for, that's okay.
Right.
Right. But it burns me up when people are paying 2.5% in fees and they're getting no value. It's like there's nothing there. It's like, well, why are you paying this? That's outrageous. First of all, 2.5% in fees in anything is outrageous.
Yeah.
And then secondly, that you're not getting value for what you're paying. That really burns me up.
Well, and that's always, I always correlate that with the conversation I have with my clients and asking, do you feel that what you are paying, after we break it down, because a lot of times clients, they don't have any idea what they're actually paying. They really don't they don't look at that statement and say, hey, here's what's coming out of my account, what percentage this or that, and I think it's for to ask the question to them, do you feel that what you're paying for when you see this, is this worth what you're receiving in services or in advice or anything of that nature? So it's putting like you said, it's not, to actually make to pay a fee for something it has to be justified. If I'm getting out of what I expect and I'm paying a fair rate for it, that's perfectly fine.
Well, and that's where I can't stand a rug pull.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I was driving yesterday. I went to fill up with gas, and I went to this particular area because my wife had actually said I was driving home. I saw these two gas stations, and they are apparently competing for bottom dollar, but they were a good 15 cents cheaper than anywhere else. And it wasn't that far out of my way. So I said, you know what? I know where I'm going for gas. And the way I decided which one I was pulling into was the same direction I was driving. So it was like, there's one on the left and one on the right. And I said, I'm going this way. I'm pulling into the right, then I can take a right and go right on. I pulled in, and what was kind of cool was they were actually 1 cent cheaper than the one across the street. And I was like, sweet, that's even better. And then I realized that said cash price, card price, 6 cents higher. And I went, are you kidding me? I was like, who's carrying cash around every day? Well, I always have a little cash on hand. but I keep it on hand for emergencies, so it's like, I was like, I'm not using that. I'm using my debit card because we have our budget and comes out of certain accounts. So I pull over, I go across the street, and you know what? It was the same price as the one displayed the other one, but they did not charge a difference when it was cash or card. So it was actually cheaper, but it looked like it was 1 cent cheaper across the street. Well, it was actually 5 cents higher.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that drives me nuts when it's like, okay, what are you actually paying? And is it transparent? And do you really know what you're doing? And that's my thing, is like, if you know what you're paying, you know if you're getting a good deal or not.
Sure.
And so if you're one of those people that pays with cash everywhere, I've got a great gas station you can utilize. For the rest of us, maybe you want to go across the street. It's not right or wrong.
Right.
It's just what's your preference. But I do think I think it's so important when you're sitting down with an advisor that you're sitting down with someone that you feel really, really comfortable with. And I know it's difficult in a first or a second appointment to have that comfort factor, but I think you can tell what people's intentions are. You can get that gut feeling.
Yeah.
You know where people are coming from. And I think part of that is also when you're going through these kinds of statements and things, I like to, after we've gone over risk, after we've gone over what you're paying in fees, after we've gone over kind of how your accounts are set up from a tax standpoint, well, then there's some other key reports I think you should really look at. You should see, how much do you have in stocks versus bonds? How much do you have in international versus domestic?
Yep.
How much are you getting from a yield standpoint? Like, what's your yield? What am I getting out of this?
Right.
What's your overlap? How many different positions do you have in different areas? So these are all the kinds of things that we like to go over. But I think it's really important in that second appointment that you are not just a listener, right? You're not just a student. You're an active participant in that conversation. I think it's important to be challenging the advisor at times and saying, okay, you said that. You pointed that out. Why did you point that out? Oh, well, I pointed it out because it's good to know. Well, why is it good to know? What's the point here, right?
Yeah. And I also encourage people, you need to ask questions. If you're not familiar with the terminology, if you're not familiar with something that you're hearing, don't be afraid to stop and ask the question.
Absolutely.
Hey, I don't understand. What do you mean by the stock intersection? What does this mean? What do you mean by pre-tax, post-tax? What is Roth? Simple things. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because if it plays into your plan, it's something significant that you might need to be aware of and understanding. I mean, not getting deep into the details of being a professional, but ask the question to help you put those pieces of the puzzle together within your own plan.
And I think you touched on something really key here. I think if you really understand a topic, you should be able to explain it simply.
Yeah.
If you're relying on all this different like industry terms and jargon, and you're sitting in front of somebody and they're making your head spin and you don't understand what they're saying, that to me says they're just trying to get you confused, overwhelmed, throw your hands up and say, I need help, as opposed to somebody who's actually trying to help you.
Yeah.
And when they're trying to help you, they're going to explain things in an easy to understand way. Now, this is the way I think about it. And this gets back to like that perfect versus the real world. In an ideal world, you might look at it and say, oh, you can handle this much risk. But the reality is, from a personality standpoint, you can't. It's like, I can't take it. Well, then if I'm just looking at computer models, I would say, oh, no, you should be this aggressive. Well, the reality is you shouldn't be, because that doesn't match your personal tolerance.
Right.
It's just like going back to that running example. It's like in a real world, I'll be honest, I've got a bit of a sweet tooth. I enjoy cookies. I enjoy donuts. I know you do too. Don't you eat double stuffed Oreos like every night?
Every night.
Every single night, or just once in a while?
Just about every night.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I knew it wasn't like a once in a blue moon thing.
It's my wind down. I have to have my glass of milk and my cookies.
Okay, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're talking to a dietitian or a nutritionist, they're going to look at you and be like, you really shouldn't be eating Oreos every night.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I know that. But I love them.
They're pretty much the worst cookie that you could eat.
It's actually, I would go best-selling worst cookie, Fig Newtons. Not a fan.
I'm not a fan either. No,
but ugh. Anyway, here's my point. If I was looking at you, I'd be like, you really shouldn't be eating Oreos every night. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm looking at a guy who's in his 40s and in very good shape. You're looking lean, you're looking trim. Why? Because you eat a handful of Oreos.
Yeah.
You don't eat a ridiculous number.
Right.
You exercise. you're not eating them all day, every day. It's a couple cookies at the end of the night to wind down.
Right.
It's that balance. And it's the same thing with your portfolio. It's like, do we have to go crazy extreme in one direction or another? Probably not. It's about what's sustainable for you. Because here's the reality. Can I give you the secret to financial success in the most extreme way?
Go for it.
Okay, here's step 1. Wait to take your Social Security until 70. Maximize that puppy. Here's step 2. Live as frugally as humanly possible. If you have a house, see if you have empty rooms, or even if it's like a guest bedroom or anything, you put a roommate in it. Okay. You get people trying to pay for that property as much as possible. You live off of exclusively rice and beans. You can get them in bulk. You can get them cheap. And then you never stop working. Invest every penny.
Right.
Now, whose ideal retirement or who wants to be doing that? That's not reality. Right. So it's like, okay, what are some things I can do from a reality standpoint, knowing that I'm not planning on renting out all the rooms of my house, and I don't want to only eat rice and beans in bulk, and I do want to retire.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And that's the difference. And I think that's where having that tailored plan, and that's what everything else wraps around to. I think the reports and the analysis are really, really helpful. But I think the key focal point of that second appointment really should be around
retirement income plan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so what everything else aside, because not every advisory firm is going to do all those other reports. Right. But at its very core, I feel like you have to at least have an income plan. Mm-hmm. Understand how are we putting this money? And that is not the same as just saying, well, this is going into a moderate account, this money is going into a conservative account, right?
Right.
So what does a income plan entail?
It takes into account, it's chronologically first and foremost. So it identifies significant life stages.
So put that in really, really simple terms.
Okay. When you have something that is occurring, and most of the time that trigger point for clients is retirement, right? We're going to identify this trigger point within that retirement plan. That's going to be, what is the change in the portfolio at that point in time? What needs to be accomplished at this stage? And there are several that we, depending on the significance of it, that we will identify.
Yeah. So if you're 59 and a half, well, that's a time that you can potentially roll over retirement funds. Mm-hmm. If you're 62, that's the earliest you can turn on Social Security.
Yep. Medicare at 65, RMDs at 73. There are, and it may not just be financial life stages that are like that. Hey, we want to buy a beach house in 3 years. Or I know that I'm going to have to buy my wife a new car next year.
Yeah.
When you have stuff like that, that's part of the customization of our plan that we built in to that retirement income plan. And that's part of the reason why, again, going back to the first the first visit that we have, why we ask those questions, why we talk through kind of all the specifics and getting into, what does it look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 10 years down the road? Because we have to build that in.
Yeah. So then looking at it and saying, okay, this is how much I need in income. Let's say I am going to retire at 65. Well, okay, how much do I need in paychecks? Mm-hmm. Where is that money going to come from? Do I turn on Social Security? Do I not? Does my spouse turn on Social Security? Do they not? It's like, if you have a pension, how does that get factored in? Should you take the lump sum? Should you take the payout?
Yep.
Should you take a structured payout for a set time period? Do you do it for your life? Do you do it for you and your spouse's life, or a percentage for the life? And then also it's like, okay, how much do you take from your IRA accounts? How much do you take from your Roth accounts? How much do you take from your after-tax accounts? And how does all of this come together to create the income that you're looking for over the lifetime?
Right.
Over that prolonged period. And so we run it out to age 90.
Financial lifespan by default out to age 90. Now, part of the question could be, hey, do you have longevity in your family?
Yeah.
Maybe we want to extend it to age 95. Maybe we want to take it to 100, and that's, again, all part of that conversation, asking the questions and things of that nature.
And that's even where something that gets overlooked so often by a lot of advisors is that long-term care component.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of saying, okay, how are you going to address long-term care? And so in the first appointment, you might be getting asked, well, what kind of life insurance do you have? What kind of long-term care policies do you have? You know, what are the different features and things you got? What's your plan around that? Or do you have one? Because that's something that I really feel like needs to be included as part of your overall plan.
Well, and it's one of the biggest unknowns. As we age, one of the biggest expenses that we run into that we don't oftentimes factor for is healthcare.
Yeah.
You know, I may be perfectly healthy, strong as an ox until I'm 78 years old. All of a sudden, I have a heart attack, quadruple bypass, and I'm on a dozen prescription pills for the rest of my life. Or I have to have someone come into my house to take care of me. Those are certain unknowns that realistically, it's very difficult to plan for. So not only do we try to accommodate strategies that we can employ to pay for those strategies,
because
right?
there's
like
some things we can plan for. Like
you can.
I can't tell you what inflation is going to be at 2 years from now.
Right.
But I can tell you we're counting on inflation over your retirement.
Yeah.
Right. And so from that standpoint, I can't tell you if you're going to go into long-term care or not.
Right.
But I can tell you we need to plan and address for it like you are, because you can plan that way. And then if it doesn't happen, all the better.
Well, and that's
But
where
if
the
it
responsible strategies that go into
Absolutely.
place, that if it doesn't happen, okay, do I lose that investment portion? What do I do? What do I get out of it? You know, whether I go into it or I don't, like how does it play into the big picture either way?
Yeah. And so here's the key thing I would say when you're sitting down with an advisor in that second appointment. There are so many nuances to this that it's going to necessitate follow-up conversations. But the reality is, and this is why we're going to do a part 3 about what you should be talking about in plan reviews, because there's so many things that are going to come up in plan reviews because you're going to have changes. And one plan review, you might be focused very heavily on taxes. Things are changing in Washington. Things are changing in your personal situation. You know, we might be much more heavily focused on taxes.
Yep.
The next one, we might spend a lot more time talking about legacy planning and estate planning and how that factors into your overall plan. There's going to be different factors, but there's certain core things you should discuss along the way.
Right.
I think the important thing in that second appointment is getting a really good grasp and feel and understanding that the advisor you're sitting across from understands you, understands your situation, and has that holistic approach, and they can take care of those things as they come up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Presenting that roadmap.
Right.
You know, that's what's significant about it. It shows, our second visit shows that we've put the time in to analyze your current situation. We've looked at your big picture, the way it sits today. We've then taken into account any changes that we would want to implement. We've designed a plan that presents it to you in a way that you can understand it. So anything that needs to be changed moving forward, this is showing out that retirement income plan. This is how it would play out chronologically through the remainder of your life or through the remainder of your goal.
Right. And that's where I think, again, it comes back to that comfort factor. And I really can't stress that enough, because if you're sitting down in front of somebody and you're like, well, I like this guy, but I can't stand the rest of his office, or it's a one-man operation. You know, one of the things that makes me feel comfortable is knowing there's a team.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have a team approach here.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, not every advisory firm does. In fact, I would say we're the exception, not the rule here. But I would say one question you should be asking in that second appointment. Let's say they put together a plan, they've got a good proposal, they say, this is how we want to run things. And you go, okay, well, one of the questions you should ask in that second appointment really is, okay, if something happens to you, what happens to my plan?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then along with that, and not just somebody passing away in a car accident or something, but also, wait a minute, are we around the same age? If you retire in 5 years on me, then what?
Yeah. What happens to my plan?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I was going to, if I'm playing the role of somebody sitting in a second appointment, I was looking right at you and I said, all right, Jordan, this is a great plan. I like it. But what happens to me and my wife if you retire in 15 years?
Well, let me introduce you to plan B. Let me introduce you to my colleague, you know, and that's where we bring another advisor in. And because we work as a team, every household that we have has a backup advisor on it. And at some point in time, you're going to get introduced to that advisor.
So you have somebody else who you know, and it's not just some random person, because it's not also just passing away. I think it's also important to remember you're allowed to go on vacation. But while you're gone, if somebody calls in, they're not going to have to wait for a week for an answer.
Right.
And because not all of your clients have the same secondary advisor. You know, some people work with you and Larry. Some people work with you and myself.
Yep.
Some people work with you and Kyle. You know, there's a whole team there, because that way, if something were to happen to you, you don't have Larry sitting there drowning going, well, wait a minute, I've got clients that I'm taking care of, and now I'm taking care of all of Jordan's. That doesn't make sense. Well, no, it doesn't make sense.
That's right. That's right. I mean, even think about it this way, like we're in and out of meetings all day long. If someone calls in and says, hey, I need to get $1,000 for Christmas for my grandkids, you know, presents. If I'm in a meeting and I can't get to that disbursement, backup, right?
Yeah.
Kyle can take care of that. Larry can take care of that.
Yep.
So that's why we work as a group, because it's not, ultimately it's the what if scenario of if I don't make it into the office today because I get in a car accident, but also just the day-to-day operations of the client needs that. You need to have that access. Yeah, and if I'm unavailable for whatever reason, there's someone else there that knows my situation, that knows my book, that knows my portfolio, that can help.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's so important to, like I said, have that comfort factor across the board, because it really is key to understand when we're talking about retirement planning, we're not talking about a short-term thing. We're talking about a long-term thing. And that's where I think it's so important for you to feel heard.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasize that enough, because for me, when my wife and I are sitting down somewhere and we're discussing something, it's, I'm fine. I want to make sure she's okay. Right?
Yeah.
It's like the reason I have a large life insurance policy is because if something happens to me, I want Kristen to be okay. I want her to be able to have the house paid off. There's not a worry about the cars. You can quit working. You know, it's like take a year and travel and spread my ashes across the globe, because if something happens to me, I want you to be okay.
Yeah.
If something happened to Kristen, I wouldn't take a year off from work. I think I would work about 85 hours a week, because there'd be no, well, I you know, it's kind of downer, but it's like, I would, what are the two things I love? Well, if I had to put them in order, it's actually three. I would put it as God, family, and work. You know, it's like, what do you have? You take away my wife? Well, I'm going to be working a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's because I care about my spouse. And that's where I think it's so important when you're putting together a plan. It's like, do you have a plan in place for if something happens to your spouse? Okay, it's great that if something happens to my advisor, you've got a backup advisor. But if something happens to me, are they taken care of? I think that's an important part of that piece that has to be built in. And it's one of those things where once you put it on paper, it actually doesn't seem that complicated, right?
No, you're right. And it gives something solid for the client to hold on to and understand and review. Okay. And I'll say this, the financial second that we have with prospects coming in, you were talking about the importance of financial planning is a long-term strategy. Okay. This second visit that you're going to have when you come in to sit down with the advisors here, this is the start of that establishing that trust, that plan in place. This is the first time that we're going to sit down and talk to you about what it means to be, here I am today, where am I going to be in 10 years? But also, and this is where I think we'll talk more about this in part 3 when we talk about the plan reviews and the intermittent meetings that we have. But revisiting, are we on track? Have things changed that we need to reestablish it? It all starts here. It all starts in this financial second visit. Here's your roadmap. Yeah. If I'm going from Pennsylvania to Florida, I need this roadmap to get me there, right? Now I'm going to have to go through West Virginia, and I'm going to have to focus on this exit on this highway, and that may be, what do I do with my RMD money, right? I may get to Georgia and realize that I have to go around a bypass in Atlanta because there's construction. Well, that may be that heart attack that I have, right? But this roadmap is going to tell me how I'm going to get there. And then those regular meetings are to kind of get ahead of any of those unknowns or those unexpected changes that we have to go through.
Yeah, because things definitely change over time. I would agree with that entirely. So I would say in that second appointment, it's really getting to understand what's the plan that's been presented to me. And then also, is this a group that I feel comfortable with? Because not every single question is necessarily going to be answered in that second appointment.
Right.
I think
It won't
part
be.
of it is making sure you feel comfortable that you're working with a group that says, as these questions come up, as that construction hits, as that unexpected event comes up, is this a team that's going to be able to take care of me? Is this a team that I feel comfortable working with? And then is this a team that has the kind of communication skills that I appreciate?
Yeah.
And I'll say, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. At the same time you're interviewing that advisor, the advisor's interviewing you.
Absolutely.
Because something that I know we do a little bit different than a lot of firms is we don't work with everyone. We work with people that have shared ideals, that have shared desires, and that we look at and we say, you know what? We have a similar worldview. We're on the same page on things. It's like when we start talking about what's going on in politics, I got a feeling we're on the same page here. It's like when we start talking about the approach to life, we have shared values. You know, I think that's really important because I think it's important to work with people that you like.
Oh, yeah.
And so something that we do here, and I would say, do this with your advisor or your potential advisor. When you're in that second appointment, do this. I call it the dinner table test. And really what it is when I'm sitting down with somebody and we're deciding if we want to work together, because it is collaborative, I'm in the back of my mind, I'm asking myself this question. Is this somebody or is this a couple that I would want to go out and have dinner with and introduce to my wife and the four of us sit down and have a meal? If the answer is yes, I feel good.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, and I'm like, no, this guy's a jerk. I can't stand him. He's got a lot of money, but I can't stand him. Well, guess what? We're probably not the right firm for you. We're not a good fit.
Right.
And at the same time, you might look at somebody and be like, okay, this guy's saying everything right. He sounds like he can make me a lot of money, but I don't like him.
There's a gut check.
That's that gut check.
Yeah.
Right. That's that inner sense of, is this the right team? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right.
And that goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I hope this has been helpful, kind of peeling back the curtain on that second visit. There's like I said, there's a couple reports that I think are really important to understand and wrap your head around. One of the big ones being around taxes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are you paying, not just now, but into the future in taxes? How is everything pulled together? Also, how you're invested right now from a fee standpoint, from a risk standpoint, but then looking forward, how do you want that to be? And it really all comes together and culminates in that income plan that says, are we going to be able to reach the objective you're looking for? Are we on track for the retirement you're looking for? And how is everything going to pull together in the end?
Yep. No, I agree. And at the end of this visit, I tell people who sit down with me, we take our time. There's no pressure at the end of the second visit to be like, okay, hey, are you ready to come on board? You need to think it through. There's a lot of information that you're going to need to digest that comes out of this second visit.
Now,
the analysis, the plan.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say if at the end of that second appointment, you're like, listen, I heard about you from some friends of mine. I wanted to see what you had. I like it. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
Of course, you can do that. But I think there's nothing wrong with taking your time, thinking about it. And I tell people this all the time. Write down your questions.
Yep.
Let's sit down. Let's go ahead and put something on the calendar for a third appointment. Let's make sure they get answered.
Yep.
You know, I think I think you really hit the nail on the head there.
Perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope this has been beneficial. I hope this is, if you're somebody who is nervous about sitting down with an advisor, I hope the first appointment podcast that we did gave you a little bit of ammunition, made you feel a little bit more comfortable knowing here's some empowering questions you can ask. Here's some things you want to make sure you get answered. And then that second appointment, making sure that the things that we've hit on, I think these are core areas that you need to be seeing and understanding. Because in my opinion, if someone's giving you a plan and they haven't told you how they got there or why they got there, there's just a gap. Right. And I think if you can understand where you're at right now, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's the things we do a little differently, that's going to play to your advantage. So whether it's with Semmax, whether it's another firm, I think that core principle applies either way. Any final thoughts as we're wrapping up here?
Go into your visits with your advisor with confidence. If you trust who you're working with, they have your best interest in mind. They're putting a plan in place that's going to help you achieve those goals. It's the reason why we do what we do. We worry about the market, the economy, your investment strategies, so you can enjoy life, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that confidence and that comfort with your advisor, then everything's good. These meetings that we have, building up to a working relationship with our clients, is merely establishing that back and forth, merely establishing that trust factor.
And that's where I think it never hurts to get that second opinion, because I've actually told some of my clients, I'm like, listen, I have no problem with you getting a second opinion, just like how a lot of folks that we work with, they came from other advisory firms because we gave them a second opinion. And what's amazing is our clients don't leave. And the reason why is they say, you've answered all those questions. I have that confidence. I have that comfort factor. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way. I say that in a way that says you should feel comfortable saying, I'm willing to put my work up against anybody's, and I think there's some not necessarily swagger, but a sense of confidence there.
Sure.
Well, on behalf of Jordan, myself, and the whole Semmax team, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope this makes you feel a little bit more confident walking into that first and second process. I think I hope at least makes you feel a little bit more comfortable with seeking a second opinion, understanding you should never be pressured into something. You should never have your arm twisted, and ultimately, it's your retirement. You deserve to live it with the freedom and comfort you want.
That's right.
So, that said, thanks so much. We hope you have a wonderful day, and feel free to enjoy life the Semmax way, holistically and worry-free.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Semmax Way. If you're not completely satisfied with your current financial advisor, give us a call for a second opinion. Please note that this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content shared on the Semmax Way should not be considered as investment advice. It is always recommended consult your licensed investment representative and a competent tax advisor, respectively, for your fiduciary needs and plans. No statement contained in the Semmax Way podcast or made by its producers, sponsors, host Matt Landon, or Semmax Financial Group is a recommendation. Semmax Financial Group and Matt Landon are not responsible or liable for investment value loss of any kind from any action taken based on information discussed in the Semmax Way podcast. Any opinions or viewpoints in this podcast are shared for information and entertainment purposes only and are not financial advice. We do encourage you to conduct further research and seek personalized advice for your specific financial circumstances. Full disclosure available at semmax.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you tune in for future episodes of the Semmax Way.
I'd like to pause a minute and just express our gratitude to our podcast sponsors, Noble's Food and Pursuits. This renowned restaurant group has been serving the community for an impressive 40 years, starting with Jim Noble's original restaurant, J. Basil Noble in High Point. Over the years, their passion for hospitality has flourished, leading them to expand into a diverse collection of 9 restaurants, a retail bakery, and a catering company. Today, we want to shine a spotlight on one of their beloved establishments, Rooster's A Noble Grill, which has been proudly open for 31 years right here in Winston-Salem. Now, Roosters is known for its commitment to offering a seasonally inspired, regionally cultivated menu featuring mouth-watering wood-fired meats, poultry, and vegetables. If you're looking for a delightful dining experience, they also host monthly wine dinners and provide live music on their inviting patio every Tuesday night. Now, make sure to pay them a visit at 380 Knollwood Street, and to secure your spot, head over to theroosterskitchen.com and make a reservation. Again, that's roosterskitchen.com.